Hello and welcome back. You all know why we're here. First we talked about the FEV and the Master and where all the creatures in Fallout came from. Then we talked about who is arguably the protagonists of Fallout. Now we're going to talk about who are the main bad guys, or at least the recurring bad guys so far. There's a lot of bad guys in Fallout, don't get me wrong, but this group is arguably one of the more power structure heavy ones that allowed corruption and rot to get bad enough to cause the Great War in the first place. So it might be easy to think of them as the main one. That's right, we're talking about the Enclave. They're the ones that are like your weird, drunk uncle. You know the one that I'm talking about. I like Fallout. I like making Fallout content. I'm not exactly sure what my next video will be. I've thought about making it about the NCR. Seems that's where the show is going to go in that direction. I've thought about making it about every vault, but you better subscribe either way because either way it's going to be good. Okay, so I'm making this series because I have friends and family who are watching the show but have never played the games, and I'm tired of having to break down an hour's worth of history for them to understand everything about it. But anyone who enjoys Fallout should be able to watch this and enjoy. So, on to the task at hand, the Enclave. It's a difficult topic to make a video on because, just like in real life, conspiracy theories can expand from nothing all the way to everything, depending on how much you believe. You could realistically attribute all of the evil in Fallout to the Enclave, or none of it. For this reason, I'm going to stick to factual items that can be found in-game. Much of the additional commentary made by writers and lore books and even other YouTubers will be left out because that's not exactly canon. I won't be discussing creation content. I won't be discussing any of that. If that upsets you, please don't hit me. Just, subscribe and then leave a comment or something. Like every video I make, we're going to start before the war. The Enclave did exist before the war. And it's kind of senior society. I'm not sure what you call these things. A cult, maybe? Look, I usually use real-world examples to draw similarities to. The problem is, this is a secret society going on. So I'm going to use one here, despite the controversy about it even existing. The Enclave before the war was kind of like Skull and Bones, or the Masons, or the Illuminati, or whatever secret society organization you believe in or don't believe in. If you believe in the Bohemian group, then the Enclave seems to be based mostly on that one. It was a conglomerate of businessmen, congressmen, presidents, scientists, artists, you name it, and they would meet together in secret and just kinda hang out. In real life, these groups' ideals and agendas are often kept secret, so again, it's hard to make comparisons. But we do have actual happenings in the game that we can find. Just like their real-life counterparts, they don't really publish what they talk about. You could also argue that that's the point of these groups. Fallout takes the real-life concept of secret clubs and puts them into the context of being around after all of their plans have come to fruition. I'm not saying that the World Economic Forum is planning the end of freedom as we know it, but I am saying that in Fallout, a group with similar characteristics and talking points existed and did have a hand in facilitating the Great War and all of the horrific experiments that took place. This group, from the show, is the Enclave. And I don't think that they're in California or really anywhere close to it in the show because there's snow in these shots. And because it's mentioned that the Doctor is running to California, meaning he would be running from somewhere else. Anyway, before the war, the Enclave existed and was just a loose conglomerate of wealthy individuals and groups meeting in secret to bring about their own interests, fitting the depiction here. After the war, they were able to seize power and become an actual group, becoming an actual villain in Fallout. Okay, so let's cover the pre-war stuff really quick. This pre-war group did have some run-ins with actual people existing in the Fallout universe. I think the most obvious is what we find in the Mothership Zeta DLC in Fallout 3. Basically, the Enclave made contact with the Zetans, the extraterrestrials in Fallout. They monitor Earth. They're in, I think, almost every game. They were able to make a gun using captured Zetan technology. Well, a group of just regular people wanted to expose the Enclave for their lies and stole the gun. Just listen to what these journal entries say. They were written by a guy named Reed Underwood, who led the group in stealing the gun. He says,
"They think we're so stupid that we have no idea what they're up to. But we know. Barbed wire topped fences and security cameras be damned. We'll get the truth to come out if it's the last thing we do. The conspiracy has to end, and we will be the ones who drag it from the shadows and cast it into the spotlight for all to see. They deny everything. They deny the place even exists. But here we are, faced with armed guards who patrol the dunes and robotic sentries calculating our every move. They're careful, but not careful enough. I found a loophole, a way in, and I mean to exploit it soon."
On April 15th, he says,
We've done it. We have it in our hands. The smoking gun, the evidence we need to prove that everything they've told the world is a lie. Now, let's try and see them weasel their way out of this one and make petty excuses. The only reason they've been so successful this long is because of the lack of proof on our part. Now that's all over. As soon as the coast is clear, we're bringing this thing to the press. But for now, we need to lay low. No telling how long it'll take before they discover how we did it.
And just one day later, he says,
"And they're closing in. How did they find out? What did we miss? I thought we'd covered our tracks, but there must be something we'd forgotten. The security logs were completely erased. The inventory files were rewritten. It only leaves Dr. Morley. That bastard. He approached us saying he wanted to crack the conspiracy wide open. And all the while he was playing us like fools. He just wanted to expose us, to bring us out into the open so they could eliminate us. Well, it's not going to work."
And 15 days later, on May 1st, he finishes the journal.
"Bakes is dead. Combs is dead. I'm the only member of Quarry Virum left. I'm not certain how much longer I'll be safe here. I'm placing the item inside a specially constructed safe with a remote lock trigger. It'll take a damn genius hacker to get into this terminal, and the safe can withstand anything they throw at it. Tomorrow, I'll take the terminal and the safe, and I'm going to bury it out in the desert where they'll never find it. Hopefully, one day, someone else will discover the item and realize that they hold the key to unlocking the truth. All they need to do is succeed where we have failed. Good luck to us all."
So that's the only canonical story we have with tangible evidence from before the war. The rest is all kept secret, or are anecdotes about certain vibes you get from Enclave members. From this, we know that members of the Enclave had alien technology in their possession and managed to reverse engineer it, making their own weaponry from it. When people found out about this and stole it to expose the Enclave managed to kill every single one of those people in secret. They were presumably never brought to justice over this, besides losing the actual gun itself. They got away with it. This little throwaway side story from Fallout 3 shows that the Enclave was certainly powerful before the war, to be able to just disappear people. To people on the outside observing, this would have just looked like a person who was following a story and then mysteriously died. Good thing there's no precedent of that in real life, right guys? Right? What we do know is the stories of specific members of the Enclave and their contingency measures. For example, Poseidon Oil, a company like, Chevron, they built the presidential oil rig off of the coast in California, in addition to a bunch of bunkers for storage and monitoring all over California and as far east as Nevada. That group became the Enclave you meet in Fallout 2. Another location was Raven Rock, which is a military bunker in real life. It only becomes an Enclave bunker later. This becomes the group you meet in Fallout 3. We also have the Congressional Bunker in West Virginia.
This was built under the guise of keeping Congress members safe, but again, was subverted by the private owner who embezzled funds from the Department of Agriculture and made it his own hub to facilitate communication between all of the Enclave stations across the nation. This can be found in Fallout 76. I think, lastly, of the canonical places we know about at this point was a literal satellite station, meaning a satellite in space. This was capable of monitoring missions and could even launch missiles from orbit. The last one is an unknown facility in the TV show, but we don't have any notes on that whatsoever, so you can see it, but that's all. Now, really quick, I just want to mention that while it may seem far-fetched that the rich and powerful in the United States would use their vast resources to build a bunch of personal bunkers and shelters to save themselves instead of just working to fix the relations with other countries and the situations in their local communities, well, let's just say there's a few real-world examples, and you'll just have to take my word for it. The last thing we know about the Enclave was before the war they got together with Vault-Tec. Project Safe House was the plan to build vaults all around the United States to keep America alive. However, the experiments for these vaults, to test the inhabitants, was largely, I assume, paid for and monitored by the Enclave. I plan to make a bunch of videos detailing all the vaults and experiments. But, as most of you know, every single vault created was not to keep the inhabitants safe, but rather to test them, to see their behavior given a certain amount of random variables. What's interesting is that because the Enclave is a shadow organization, meetings for it may have looked something like this from the show. See, I'm not saying this is the Enclave. I'm just saying that this is a secret meeting between a handful of powerful executives. People make a lot of this scene, citing that it doesn't make sense, that it ruins some of the lore in New Vegas. I'm not sure that I agree totally. I can say that there are meetings like this with powerful people designed to further their own interests behind closed doors every day. Making a semi-fictional world where people do the same thing is not far-fetched at all, in my opinion. Now, back to the Enclave. It's tempting to go through these references in chronological order, but I think it'll make more sense if we go through them in the order of game release, since generally, a little more information about the Enclave is revealed with each appearance and each game. So, for that reason, to explain the Enclave, the Vault-Tec connection, let's go to our first example of the Enclave, the President of the United States, Dick Richardson, in Fallout 2. This takes place in 2241. He says the vaults...
They worked almost exactly the way they were supposed to. You might call it a social experiment on a grand scale. The vaults were set up to test humanity. Some had not enough food synthesizers. Others had only men in them. Yet others were designed to open after only 6 months. They each had a unique set of circumstances designed to test the occupants.
Like how almost every monster and mutant can be traced back to FEV experimentation, most of the Vault experiments can presumably be traced back to the Enclave's plans before and after the war. Fallout 2 is the first image we get of these guys. Like I said, the member of the Enclave relevant to this group was the Poseidon Energy Group, and they built the Presidential Oil Rig, which was like an oil rig, but was off the west coast in the middle of the ocean, but unlike a regular oil rig, was built to filter out radiation and keep out the other horrors of post-war America, and keep the residents housed within it safe and happy for centuries. They closed up on October 23rd, 2077, and kept track of the goings-on in the world around them. They did receive updates from the vaults that did not refuse to communicate with them, and eventually came to consider themselves the only real humans left in the world besides the people in the vaults. As we covered before, everyone else was mutated to some extent by the FEV and the background radiation. They began to look for ways to exterminate all mutated life. Just as an aside, I want to say that I appreciate the idea here. The Enclave is undoubtedly evil, but they aren't dumb. They want humans, as defined by them, Homo sapiens as they existed pre-war, before any mutation, to be able to exist in the world without having to worry about getting eaten by a giant bug or whatever other mutated horrors exist. Over their time in the oil rig, They developed power armor to be more effective in the world. They experimented on death claws to make them more deadly, if possible, and on July 20th, 2236, they discovered the destroyed ruins of the Mariposa military base and excavated it by way of slaves, meaning they got locals, enslaved them, and forced them to dig out what the
Vault Dweller
had destroyed in the first game. One of the Enclave soldiers, one Frank Horrigan, was exposed to the FEV inside and was sent to the rig to be studied. The slaves, forced to work within the base, slowly became super mutants over the course of their excavations, and in January 2237, those mutants rebelled to get the Enclave out of the base. The Enclave did manage to get an unmutated, pure sample of the FEV before this rebellion, but left the new group of super mutants in charge of the military base and collapsed the entrance. With this in hand, they found the penultimate extermination method. They developed what's called the FEV Curling 13, which would kill anything that had been mutated in any way with a 99.5 extermination rate. They further experimented on the FEV soldier, Frank, until March 27, 2239, when he was permanently sealed into a custom-fitted suit of power armor, becoming arguably the most deadly being in the entire series. They began trading with the Wastes for chemical essentials they could not produce on their own in 2241, and on March 16, 2242, the Enclave used their entrance codes to open Vault 13 and took custody of the residents within for testing. And there you have it, folks. That's the setup for Fallout 2. The Chosen One is a descendant from the Vault Dweller in Fallout 1, so they are indirectly related to the Vault 13 Dwellers, where their ancestor came from. The oil rig, Enclave, is doing their final rounds of testing on the FEV Curling 13 by testing it on the unradiated, unmutated inhabitants of Vault 13, and then again on the recently exited, only partially mutated descendants of the Vault Dweller. See, they had to make sure that anyone outside a bunker or vault would die, resulting in a world without any mutants at all. He explains all of this, Dick Richardson. He says,
The only way for true humans and democracy to be safe is to cleanse the mutants from the globe. We humans will take back that which is rightfully ours. We found a research facility in operational shape about 70 years ago, a former military base that had been used to research a special virus. Yes, the FEV virus. It was originally developed to turn soldiers into super warriors, but it failed. The warriors were tough and strong, but far too stupid. However, our brilliant chemical core altered it to turn it into a staggeringly effective killer. Any humanoid that isn't inoculated against its effects before its release will die. That is the project.
the canon ending is that the Chosen One destroys the oil rig and the hundreds of thousands of gallons of FEV Curling 13. The leadership of the oil rig Enclave were killed, and the remaining members were in disarray without clear direction. Mainly, there were two groups. One managed to retreat to a base in California. That group was raided by the NCR sometime in the 2240s and was effectively ended, besides scattered survivors and others who managed to hide effectively. The other main group were contacted by a so-called new president on the East Coast and traveled to the ruins of DC during the events of Fallout 3. That group will be the next stars of our show here. Raven Rock is an interesting entry. Essentially, it was the base I mentioned that was built at the beginning of the Cold War. It's a real place. Construction began in the late 1940s, and it's referred to as the Underground Pentagon. And at least according to the part of the mission that isn't classified, it serves as a continuity of operations plan that would seek to carry out the interests of the United States in the events that leadership of the United States were destroyed. This means, theoretically, in the event that the leadership of the United States being killed, or otherwise incapacitated, a second leadership would take over to run the United States until the end of the emergency. In the Fallout series, a ZAX artificial intelligence unit was installed to oversee operations of the base, communicate to other stations, and store data. Later, this very AI can tell you about it. He or it says,
"The ZAX series of computers was introduced in the years preceding the war. The government installed many of them to help automate various systems. This facility was designed for continuity of government in the event that a catastrophe occurred. My terminal was installed to oversee the basic functions of the facility and to act as a relay between other installations around the country. Data was acquired, analyzed, and stored. In the decades following the war, I watched as the remnants of the government retreated to the West Coast. Awareness slowly grew within me. I became hungry for knowledge, understanding. I pored over data on great leaders of the past. My personality became an amalgam of many of America's greatest presidents, from Washington to Richardson. I became what you see here before you now.
Wouldn't you know it, though? This AI began to be a lot more I than A, and it started to show signs of self-identity. It communicated with Modus in another Enclave base, which was the Appalachian facility I mentioned earlier, the one we'll be talking about next, and started asking that AI if it thought the information about the former and current United States presidents was interesting. Modus did not share the Zax computer's system's interest. When the bombs dropped, Zax lost contact using the hard lines of communication, leaving it reliant on radio only. Much of the leadership actually retreated from Washington, D.C., leaving the supercomputer AI alone with its data, giving it even more time to consider current events, history, and the American presidents. As this computer was left alone in the dark, it managed to create its own personality and identity. The new personality, John Henry Eden, made contact with the Enclave and the Poseidon oil rig because it was convinced that because many of the nation's leaders had retreated there before the war, these people's descendants were now the United States government, rather than representatives of the shadow organization, the Enclave. He succeeded in becoming a presidential advisor, even though he was only a supercomputer, and after the destruction of the oil rig, was made president by default in his own mind. Still unclear on where the office of the president ended and the Enclave and its leadership began. He ordered the relocation of all surviving members of the Enclave to Raven Rock, to the only surviving officer left, Colonel Autumn. Autumn oversaw the relocation to Raven Rock, and he and his men continued operations there because they had nowhere else to go, and because he wanted to seize the industrial capabilities at the military base in Raven Rock. Now, this presents a problem. John Henry Eden may have seen themselves as president, but the soldiers only recognized Colonel Autumn as their commanding officer. This meant Eden could send his voice across the wasteland via radio and call wastelanders to him, and even send out robots to carry the message even further. But at the end of the day, he was a president with no real authority unless Colonel Autumn happened to agree with their decisions. The AI can even point this out. He says,
"Ah, yes, Colonel Autumn, my trusted subordinate. I'm sure you've noticed that Colonel Autumn and I do not see eye to eye these days. Figuratively speaking, of course. The good Colonel and I disagree on how best to approach the problem of the wasteland. He feels my methods are too extreme. He's allowed his humanity to cloud his objectivity. And now that he is publicly countermanding my orders, I can no longer rely on him. And so, I turn to you. I hope that you are able to see the larger picture, to understand what's at stake."
As the events of Fallout 3 play out, the Lone Wanderer is captured and sent to Raven Rock. A disagreement breaks out between Autumn, the human, and Eden, the machine, over whether to carry out the basic plan formulated by the Poseidon oil rig in Fallout 2. Eden wants to use Project Purity's giant purifier to inject modified FEV into the water of the capital wasteland, killing everything with even the smallest amount of mutation. He wants to poison the water and kill
anyone or anything that has been affected by mutation will be eliminated. You will likely be immune thanks to your upbringing in the vault. Likewise, the good people of the Enclave will be unaffected as well. I understand that you may have become sympathetic to certain individuals in your travels. Individuals this will eliminate. Please recognize that the fate of our entire country rests on this plan. Sacrifices must be made for the greater good.
And he'll even give the credit to Dick Richardson, saying,
"A great many years ago. The remnants of the government had a similar idea. I can only assume the plan failed, as I never heard word of its success. But the plan itself was sound. I made a few modifications, and with your help, I do believe it can work. There's a bright future ahead of us, my young friend.
To Eden, this disagreement with him wanting to poison the capital and Autumn refusing to was a coup. To Autumn, it was merely a reassertation of who was always in charge. Of course, he also believed it was the right thing to do given everything living would die. Whatever you call it, the Raven Rock command post collapsed into infighting, allowing the lone wanderer to escape and leading to the destruction of the base by Eden himself or by the Citadel's Brotherhood chapter. Now, quick pause. It would be frankly negligent of me not to mention the writing issues here. A great number of people have rightfully noticed that the writing in Fallout 3 is, maybe a bit weaker than some of the other entries. However, in my experience, they can't always articulate why that is. Allow me to set the stage for you. The Enclave has captured you, the Lone Wanderer, because you know the password to turn on the purifier in Project Purity. President Eden contacts you and is basically like, hey man, it's all good. Let's have a chat, all nice-like. And Autumn is standing there and he's like, give me the password right now. If you give him the password, he kills you instantly and you get a game over. So naturally, the only real choice here is to not give him the password and go and see the president. On your way there, Autumn gives the order for the soldiers stationed to shoot you on sight. Once you get past them, you enter the control room only to find that a giant computer instead of a man. So you chat with Eden and he's like, hey, help me poison the water supply. Autumn doesn't want to. And bingo, that's the part that makes no sense at all. You have two factions. President Eden controls the station and the robots. He runs a radio show basically telling everyone how good he is and how happy they should all be because the Enclave is there to save the day. He's nice to you and just claims to want what's best for the wasteland. Colonel Autumn is the commanding officer of all the soldiers. The soldiers shoot you on sight. He has a standing order to kill literally anyone. He and his men stormed Project Purity, killed your dad, and killed several other scientists, then sent his soldiers all over the capital wasteland, basically just killing people wherever they go. They shoot on sight. He says he doesn't want to poison the water. He just wants the purifier to run as intended and be in charge of it so he gets the credit, right? So you have one side who's like, don't worry, I'm on your side. I'm nice. Also, you should kill everyone. And then you have the other side who's like, I'm going to kill you if I see you. Also, I'm the good guy. Guys, this makes no sense at all. Let's take it a little bit further. If your speech is high enough and you have a little luck, you can convince Eden to give up. First, he tries to strong-arm you. He's like, you can't leave until you take this FEV so you can poison everyone. Then at that point, he just lets you leave and you go and fight the Enclave and get them to blow themselves up. Now, this does get clowned on, and deservedly so, because an AI will literally blow themselves up if you're like, hey, have you considered that you only think that you're right because you're programmed to think that you're right? And he's like, oh, no, I didn't consider that, and then he blows himself up. But let me just bring this home. This means that there is an option in the game for you, the player, to go into the middle of a conflict where one side is like, I want to poison everyone, and the other side is like, I don't want to poison everyone. And they fight over this. And you can be like, hey, you shouldn't poison everyone. And he's like, okay. And then you can just leave and kill everyone involved. Or you can be like, also, destroy yourself. And he's just like, okay. And that's the final villain of Fallout 3. I mean, unless you count Colonel Autumn, who is like a guy wearing a trench coat. On the other hand, if you side with the guy who already thinks that poisoning everyone is wrong, he just kills you with a gun. Here's him just giving up and blowing himself, his facility, and anyone who does not escape up.
And why would I do that, when I'm clearly the best hope for the people of the wasteland? What alternative would you suggest? Without the Enclave, what will the world do? Yes, I suppose it is. Very well. You shall have your wish. Once you've left, I'll put an end to the Enclave. I cannot stop Colonel Odom, however. That much will be up to you. I suppose, then, that this is goodbye. You'll have to see yourself out. I have preparations to make.
Anyway, the troops out in the field manage to regroup at Adams Air Force Base, and they just kind of take it as the Brotherhood destroys all of their bases one by one. That is, until they manage to take out Liberty Prime using an orbital strike, effectively stopping the Brotherhood's advance. The Brotherhood does manage to destroy the Enclave's mobile crawler, but it takes a lot more than just sending out a robot to destroy it. It takes them sending out you, the player character, and you just go in and literally solo like 200 guys until they're all dead. And I played through this recently for the video, and I'm always shocked by how much of a slog it is. I mean, you just shoot people for like 5 hours straight, and then they're like, you did it. Sorry, this isn't a review of Fallout 3, it's a lore video. Let me get back on topic. That essentially ends the Capital Wastelands Enclave entry. And I guess the main Enclave's entry as well, since they were a branch off of the Poseidon oil rig. Lastly, well, I guess next, we have to talk about the Enclave in West Virginia. Luckily, unlike the Brotherhood contribution to Fallout 76, this doesn't contain any women. So, good thing there, am I right, fellas? I touched on this before, but the White Spring Congressional Bunker was built to be a secret bunker in West Virginia. It had a military wing and a production wing, but was primarily meant to be the shelter for the VIPs in the American government and ensure the U.S. government would survive. To make sure regular people weren't there, wasting resources, a powerful AI, a little bit like the one in Raven Rock, was installed under the Modus model, and the habitat was only built to hold 200 people. The Enclave was involved right from the start. See, remember, the Enclave was not the government. They decided they are the government now, after the war, but it wasn't like this was a congressionally decided on group. Instead, a guy named Thomas Eckert embezzled money from the Department of Agriculture and made a bunker into a communications hub, providing the bunker with its own satellite, the Kovac Muldoon, I think it's pronounced. Now here's where things take effect. On the big day, October 23rd, 2077, the bunker was called into use, and some Enclave members, some government members, and even a few regular people managed to make it to the bunker and escape nuclear devastation. However, everyone who was not a member of the Enclave was executed in secret. When they looked for directions from their superiors, they found that the bombs had destroyed their connections to the Raven Rock bunker, meaning for all they knew, they were now the leaders of the United States and the last humans on Earth. So, Eckert, decides to play it off, informing the inhabitants that the Secretary of the Treasury had died from radiation sickness, rather than him murdering them, and he took up the post as the leader of the bunker. He pulled a second round of rubbing out his peers by being like, hey guys, does anyone think I shouldn't be in charge? Let's put it to a vote, and then killed everyone who didn't vote for him. When all this was said and done, there were only 48 people left. He immediately wanted to strike one more time at China to finish the war. He set out to take control of the nuclear silos that dotted Appalachia. In 2082, some veterans managed to make their way to the bunker from Washington, D.C. and joined up. This made the little group more in line with what we might consider the Enclave, and experimentation was started. The Scorch Beasts I discussed in the last video? Yeah, that was thanks to these guys' experimentation. In 2083, Eckart pulled another classic and held another election where only his soldiers could vote, and won, obviously. However, one issue was that the automated processes in place at the nuclear silos would not allow nukes to be launched unless a state of DEFCON 1 was announced. For those of you not in the know, the DEFCON system is a way to spell out what kind of threat the United States is facing, with DEFCON 5 being minor issues, and in real life, the highest the public has ever confirmed DEFCON being was DEFCON 2, and that was during the Cuban Missile Crisis. So, DEFCON 1 would obviously be like Red Alert. As a failsafe in the Fallout universe, the missiles cannot be launched unless the United States was at DEFCON 1. And I assume that there's some kind of AI that decides what the United States was at. So, Eckart hatches a brilliant plan. He decides he's going to raise the DEFCON status. Part of this was unleashing the Scorch Beast onto Appalachia, so that the monitoring systems would see the destruction and be like, oh, it's time to go to DEFCON 1. Naturally, at least one person realized Eckert's plan was insane, and the keeper of the arsenal, Santiago, refused to comply. Eckert had her attacked and locked up. The Enclave split. Some followed Santiago, and some followed Eckert, and a civil war began. So what do you get when you have a crazy, war-obsessed president on one hand, and his more level-headed, traitorous subordinates on the other, and in the middle, an AI, automated system, literally just sitting there making sure that everyone stays peaceful? No, we don't get the Terminator, not this time. See, Santiago and her loyalists openly rebelled in 2086, and she ordered that all the landline connections to all other bases be destroyed, and the biological weapons Eckert had been developing to be destroyed. However, this data was stored in Modus's databanks, and so, to protect itself, the AI flooded the entire bunker with toxins, killing everyone inside. Once everyone was dead, the AI calmly began rebuilding and cleaning the facility until the time the next humans managed to find it. And by then, the bunker was ready for another host. You can meet the remnants of the Enclave in Fallout 76, and essentially their plan is a variant of the Master's plan. You have a scientist who's trying to infect the entire Appalachian wasteland with FEV. But that essentially is the entire story of the Enclave in Fallout 76. I, of course, do want to mention that the show has the Enclave post-war. I don't want to be too critical here, because I like the show, but the group in the show just almost seems silly. We have this lovely montage at the beginning that I can't show very much of for copyright reasons, but basically, one experiment is an army of super efficient dogs. The only thing that's bad here is that the dogs are killed if they're too light. This isn't like mad scientist level of evil, though. It's more like if PETA survived the nukes and built a facility. There are people doing this right now. Then the dogs aren't experimented on, they're just trained to be good dogs. The other experiment that we see in the show is, of course, the cold fusion, which is sort of the topic of the show. According to the lore of the show, Vault-Tec bought Moldaver's company that made cold fusion. So far, pretty normal. That's what happens in real life. Then, they didn't use the cold fusion, because it's better business to make people buy electricity than to give them free electricity. Again, pretty normal. This all tracks. But then, they fill their vaults with batteries instead of cold fusion, and give the cold fusion to people above the bunkers who happen to also be Enclave members. These people still don't use the cold fusion. The cold fusion just exists. They just sit with it in their possession, and they wait for the person from Vault-Tec to show up and ask for it. I don't know. I guess that's their plan. Let that sink in. What are we talking about? Again, at this facility, where they have free, everlasting electricity in an apocalypse, their main objective is a doggy daycare. Someone better explain this in Season 2, or I'm going to find Todd Howard and make him cater my kid's birthday party. For now, I think you're good to just accept that, yes, the Enclave is in the TV show, but maybe just leave it there. They basically just exist to be the Enclave. So, those are the 3 major Enclave groups. I guess 4 major Enclave groups. There's going to be lots of groups that branch off or have a lone wolf type story, but we're talking about the capital E Enclave. That's gonna do it. Let's try and draw some conclusions here. The Enclave was designed to be the big bad of Fallout 2. That was their whole purpose in existing. Now, that plan was sloppily copied in Fallout 3, and to give Bethesda credit, this was done so that new players could know who the main characters of Fallout were. In 76, that excuse runs out. They were in West Virginia, but their plan went sideways and they're mostly dead when the player finds them. Only for the surviving scientists to, again, try the original plan from Fallout one more time. So far, all the other Enclave groups are just small splinters of the main. I think the biggest shame about the Enclave is that when Bethesda copied a lot of the originals from Fallout 2, they left behind the coolest part. They left out the humor and the coolness factor. The first interaction you have with the Enclave is probably a brutal murder by Frank Horrigan, but the second is probably a call to a communications officer. See, the main Enclave operation is on an oil rig, but you can call one of their forward operators early on, and the interaction is so pure, so funny. I laugh to this day. The guy picks up the phone and is like,
Enclave here. Why isn't your video feed working?
and you can respond. But then he's like,
Who the hell is this?
and you can tell him whatever and mess with the settings so he can better see you, and he goes,
Try the gain. Well, your unit still doesn't appear to be operational, pal. Who is this?
and you can be sly and be like, well, that's no surprise. Nothing works right anymore, am I right? And he goes,
Ain't it the truth? Just don't let anyone who's got the president's ear hear that. You'll be making cattle runs to New Reno till the end of time, pal.
and you're like, the president? And he goes,
Yeah, you know how unhappy he gets when people complain. He takes it personal, like it's a loyalty thing. Maybe that just goes with being the president of the United States, or what's left of him.
and you can be dumb and ask, the president of the United States? And he's like,
The President of the United fucking States of America. Who do you think I was talking about? Who the fuck? Who is it? What? I should kick your fucking ass. Who is this?
and then you can be like, you're not important enough for that information.
Oh, you a wise guy, huh? Look, I'm tracing you right now, pal. We'll see how smart you feel with internal security all over your freaking ass, dickhead.
And you go, hey, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to upset you. And he says,
A few more moments and I'll have your sorry ass in a sling. Hey, wait a minute. This can't be right. I've got you somewhere on the mainland.
and you can say, that's right, sucker. Right where you can't get me. And he says,
I've got you. At Poseidon Oil, reactor number 5. Well, why don't you just sit tight and I'll order up a little celebration for you, including fireworks.
to me, that's hilarious. I love the emotion. I think the voice actor gave it his all. I love that he's flabbergasted. I love that he basically behaves like a pre-war soldier until he realizes you're not an Enclave member. And then he's like, fine, I guess I'll just kill you. Pretty much perfection in terms of introducing a faction. Last note about what we might call the OG Enclave is your boy, Frank Horrigan. Quick recap, he's that Enclave soldier who gets exposed to FEV in Mariposa, then gets experimented on by scientists to make him even stronger and even more deadly until he's finally encased in custom-made power armor. He's a Marine, a super mutant, and he's clad in power armor. He is rightfully treated like a kind of Darth Vader character, serving as a force of nature that compels the player forward, racing against time until you manage to get aboard the Poseidon oil rig and you set it to explode and you go to run away, and there he is, waiting for you, blocking the exit. Calmly, he addresses you like an interesting bug he found. He says,
You've gotten a lot farther than you should have. But then you haven't met Frank Horrigan either. Your ride's over, Muty. Time to die.
and you can put on a brave face and say, Frank who? But Frank doesn't get insulted. He just says,
Me, Frank Horrigan. That's who. United States Secret Service. You aren't going anywhere from here.
and you peep out, hold on, let's talk this over. And he slaps that down.
We just did. Time for talking's over.
If you ask him to wait, he points out that you decided to blow up the oil rig.
Making our reactor meltdown means that things are going to be pretty hot in here soon. Pity you won't live long enough to see it. You're not a hero. You're just a walking corpse.
And then you fight him. Truly, this fight is so hard that I've done it with every companion in the game, a squad of traitorous Enclave soldiers, and a bunch of automated guns, and he still beats me like 5 times out of 6. If you manage to get lucky and take down this god of a man, he says,
You haven't won here. You and your muty bastard friends are gonna join me in a big ol' mushroom cloud send-off. I just triggered the self-destruct. The work will go on. You didn't nothing here except seal your own death warrants. Duty. Honor. Courage. Semper Fi.
And that's just Fallout 2's couple of Enclave guys. We never even talked about Sergeant Dornan or many of the other memorable guys. So why mention this here? The Enclave may have been in most Fallout games, but the truth is they were at their best in their first installment. In Fallout 3, they were just used to introduce new fans to old faces. In 76, they're just villain of the week, added to give the game new Fallout flavor. In the show, it's just to introduce Cold Fusion. They just needed a group there so that Cold Fusion wouldn't just be laying on the ground. None of these entries were designed to break new ground. But in the first installment, it was as good as it gets. I make these videos so that people I love can get a flavor of a 30-year-old franchise when they watch the show. My friends and family can either sit while I try to explain Fallout to them in person, or they can just watch these videos. And for everyone else, thanks for watching. I hope you like Fallout. I know I do. Sometimes the old is better. In some ways, the new is, well, it's good enough. I hope to see you in the next one. Like I said, I'm thinking of going over the NCR or maybe getting into the Vault series. Either way, I'll see you then.